Last week we had a baptism, didn't we? And I've got to know Laura over the year that she's been coming, and I know her testimony, and it felt too powerful to squish it on the end of the baptism. When everybody is just looking forward to coffee and cake, basically, they're like, "Dunker," and then where's the coffee? So I just didn't want to lose that. So Laura, would you like to pop up here? And Manuel's got a microphone for you, and give her a welcome. And so we're going to hear from Laura. I feel a little bit like Oprah when I sit up here. Not Jeremy Kyle, but Oprah. Yes, it's far more classy. We're going to hear from Laura today. And I think, when I first became a Christian, I loved hearing people's testimonies because people's life stories really fascinated me. And also, as a new Christian, it fascinated me as to how God works in people's lives and how he changes people's lives. And how when people said, well, God spoke to me, well, how did he do that then? All of those things just really fascinated me. And for a while, I sort of felt like I joined a club where everybody else had all of this happen to them, but I didn't know the rules and I didn't know how it all worked. And then just simply going to church and just hearing the word of God preached and hanging around with other Christians and going to prayer meetings and all of that, until one day I felt like God had spoken to me, and I was so excited. And God is there through all of our journeys. And I said last week, you all have a story. And I wish I could line you all up here one after another, but it would take so long to hear your story, because everybody's story is unique, but everybody's story has got God in it. So we're going to hear from Laura. And Laura, perhaps we ought to start with you way back at the beginning. Okay. Not quite when you were born, but just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and about your childhood. Yeah, sure. And those sorts of things.
Okay, so my childhood, sadly, was very traumatic. From the birth to 7 years old, I'd say was standard. Mum and dad together, first child, first grandchild, spoilt rotten. And at the age of 7, that changed. And that's when the trauma began. Mum and dad divorced. And I lived with mum alone. Dad moved to London. And for the next 4 years, it was a very lonely, sad, dark time. I'm not going to share the details. Obviously, we all feel quite depressed by the end of it. But I don't want to do that. So, although the trauma was really awful for me, it shaped me to who I am today. Nurturing, kind, loving. I can go on and on. No, not really. But it has. It's made me who I am. And without that experience, I wouldn't be who I am today. I tried every way possible to deal with the pain of the past, and nothing really permanently helps except Jesus. Talking of Jesus, let me tell you where it began. At the age of 9, I lived with mum still, so for the 4 years, 7 till 11, I lived with mum. At the age of 9, my nan was diagnosed with cancer, quite extreme, and I visited Nan, sorry, I lost myself there. I visited Nan a week before her operation, and Nan wrote a prayer on a small piece of paper for her and me to read. We'd both made a pact that we would read this prayer together on the morning of her operation. Mum was completely against God, so I had to hide this piece of paper and keep this paper close to my heart, because it wouldn't be a very good thing for Mum to find this piece of paper. She was very definitely against God. And if I mentioned God, maybe I'd done something at school and came home and shared that with Mum, she would be like really bitter and angry. Her voice would be, God, what has he ever done for me? So that was Mum's way of belief, her belief. So I kept this piece of paper really tight. And on the morning of Nan's operation, I thought, okay, right, we're going to pray. It's time. We're going to pray together. I thought to myself, Nan's doing her bit, and I'm going to do mine. But hang on a moment, I don't know how to pray. What do I do? And then I remembered in school, we put our hands together. So little 9-year-old me put my hands together, kneeling on my bed, elbows on the windowsill, reading this piece of paper and looking up at the sky. I remember it like yesterday, looking up at the sky and reading this prayer. Nan got through the operation. She survived. She's very well today. And in my mind, that made me think, maybe God listened to me. And from then on, God was my friend. And all my worries and my sadness, I shared through prayer, in secret, obviously, because Mum wouldn't have allowed that. But through prayer. So I encourage you all to share with your children, to share with one another, and encourage yourselves. Pray, because He is listening. It might not. He might not answer straight away. He might not answer next week, month, but he will. He will. I'm evidence of that. So
Lovely.
That's the beginning.
I think that's really beautiful that you can see the birthing of a very childlike faith. That actually, that's what I see, Laura, is that childlike faith. You know, as I've got to know you, that was birthed right then from just believing God and that prayer. There was just something that came within you, wasn't there? There was just that faith, that childlike faith that has kept you. Now I know that life did change for you around about age 11, didn't it?
Yes. So at the age of 11, I moved from living with my mum to living with my dad and my stepmum Kim. For the first couple of years, it was wonderful, and then unfortunately Dad became an alcoholic, so there was a different kind of trauma there, but we'll go back to that. Not long after I moved in with Dad and Kim found Jesus, and she began going to church. And all those questions that I'd had as a child of how to pray, who is God, all the questions I had as a child came flooding back. And the curiosity I handed over to Kim, and I was question. And she said, well, why not just come along with me? Come to church with me. And I did. And that was around Easter time, and I remember it so well. We did a march, and we did the March for Jesus, didn't we?
Anybody remember that? March for Jesus? Brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah,
of its time.
Yeah, I remember that, and I was in my element. Love, it was great. And then we did a Good Friday march. So we're right on top of Easter now. Hence the reason why the baptism last week was just so special and wonderful and just so powerful. Good Friday march, and I remember on the march standing next to a lady called Teresa, who actually came last week. She's part of a family, Williams family. She's blind. Her husband's also blind, and they have 6 children. And I became very close to this family whilst at church at that age. And I was standing next to her, and she was singing, and she was part of the worship group, and I remember just listening to her voice in complete awe of the beauty and the words. And she placed her hand on my back, and I can remember this clearly. The feeling, and I'm going to try and explain it as best I can, and I'm sure some of you most of you will know. The warmth and the tingling, I can only say like an electric, but not electric, sort of the warmth and the tingling from her hand on my shoulder just made my whole body, from the tip of my head to my toes, just feel so warm and loved, and just this sensation was amazing. And knowing myself well, I thought, hang on a minute, something's going on here. And I turned to Teresa and I said to her, I feel really strange. And I explained to her, and she said, that's God. That's God telling you that he loves you. And she burst into tears for me, happy tears. And that was the beginning of my church years. Yeah.
I think those times are really special, and you never forget them. I'm sure all of you have got stories where you've had a moment with God. We used to run a program that went out on Sky, and it was basically our church services that were filmed and put on Sky, and we called them Touched by God, because that supernatural touch of God, that moment when you know that you've had something that is divine happen to you, you know that whatever you have just experienced is not natural, it's supernatural, it's spiritually natural. And it in those moments, it sort of gives you that extra faith. God is real. God is real. What just happened to me? You said, actually, Laura, when we were talking, you said you felt held in that moment.
Yes.
That's a really, really powerful thing in counselling. When we counsel people, we have to leave them not undone, but we leave them feeling held. That is really, really important, and that's what God did for you in that moment. That He just poured His love upon you,
yes,
and left you feeling held. And I think that experience was going to really continue holding you,
yeah,
in the years to come,
yeah,
wasn't
I was
it?
super hungry after that. Like hungry, not physically hungry for church, hungry for God. Yeah.
So you started going to church. Tell us about that.
I did. So that was me, and I just fell into church, and I put my all into church and youth club, and I literally did all that I could do at church. I believed, and that just made me even more excited to serve. I went to youth group. I did guitar for the worship group. I won't say that too loudly in case I get a poke. Hey, we didn't know that. Yeah, and it was just amazing. But as I grew, so from the age of 11, going to church, got to about 15 years old, and started hanging around with more friends from school than people from like friends from church, and slowly dwindled away from Christ and church, and met my ex-husband at 16. I left home at 16. I had my own flat at that age. It was very difficult, but living with my dad as he was seemed the answer. Dad wasn't very happy that I left home, and our relationship separated for a number of years. Fast forward from 16, when I met my ex-husband, for the next 20 years, I didn't pray. I didn't enter a church. I'm ashamed of that, but I know God is good and He forgives me for that. My husband was very the same as my mum, really, not against God, and I wanted to please my husband. I wanted to be who my husband wanted me to be. So I turned my faith the other way. Friends and my ex-family also wanted me to, not go to church and not believe. So that's who I was for those 20 years.
Just hearing that, I had an understanding of how difficult that was for Laura when you align yourself, when you you meet somebody and they're not a Christian. And, I think one of the things that Glenn and I often say, and we're not, when we counsel people who are looking to get married, one of the things we say, if your partner is not a Christian, often what happens is that initially they say, oh yeah, you can still go to church. Oh yeah, that's fine. I'll do my thing on a Sunday morning. And I think this has been particularly with women that I've seen this, is that gradually that actually they're being asked to stay at home, or I want you to come out, I want you to do this. And I think that's where it does become very difficult when you have two different value systems going on. And it is very difficult to continue your faith unless you have somebody who's very understanding. And I do know, women that do have very understanding husbands that will never set foot in a church. And I do know that happens. But how much easier if you are totally aligned to the same value system, how much easier. And so for Laura, with that being shut down, and I think you said that he was actually very anti and quite mocking of your faith,
yes.
Which caused you to sort of just withdraw and to keep everything under wraps. And 20 years is quite a long time, isn't it?
Yes.
But God had you.
Yes, he
had you
never
all that
left
time.
Me. He'd never left me. And for the last 6 months of coming along to this church, I've been praying to God. I've been saying, will you talk to me? You hear, God spoke to me. I'm like, he's not talking to me. Can you talk to me clearly? And then over the last week, I've had this, as I've been praying, I have been talking to you, and these memories coming back to me, and those memories are in the last 20 years, of those 20 years that I'm talking about. I never left you, and I have been talking to you. A couple of those memories I want to share with you today. So I said that Dad and I, our relationship kind of separated when I left home, but we did sort of bond back, and I kind of became his next of kin. I took it on myself to look after him. I think I'll share with you first the one that was put a little bit of difficulty between my ex-husband and myself. So I would go and take Dad a dinner every evening, and my ex-husband would be the driver, the chauffeur, and he would take me and drop me off, and he'd wait outside, and I'd take dinner in and I'd leave it for Dad. We did it this particular day, and got home and just sat down with our own dinner, TV on, slippers on, as you do. And it's really hard to describe. This sense, this feeling, these words, over and over again, you need to go back to Dad. You need to go back to your dad. You need to go back then. Just thought, stop, you think it's yourself. Shush. And we started eating, and then you need to go back to Dad. And this feeling made me so anxious. I said to my ex-husband, Steve, we need to go back to Dad. And his face, I've just sat down to my dinner, can you leave me alone? I don't want to drive again. Oh, but please take me back to Dad. So we had a little disagreement, as you do. I won. And we went back to Dad. He was parked down the road outside like we did. And as I opened the front door, I have a key. as I opened the front door, these bellowing fumes of smoke came out of the front door and just clouded me. I did need to go back to Dad. Dad had fallen asleep on the mattress on his bed and dropped a cigarette on his mattress. He was fine, completely under the influence of alcohol, and didn't really, he wasn't any of the wiser. And I managed to get him up off of the bed and put him on the sofa, and my only thought was to drag the mattress outside in safety of the garden and put the fire out, call the brigade and etc. Dad woke up the next day and where's all this like soot and smoke come from? He had no idea whatsoever, unfortunately. But those words, you need to go back to Dad, I was reminded of those this week when I was praying. God, you're not talking to me. You don't talk to me. Yes, I do, and I have. That was the one incident. The second, years passed, and Dad disappeared. I had to report him missing. It was awful. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and it was very, very scary. I had to obviously carry on with my life, and I was walking out of London Bridge Station on my way out of work, on my way home from work, and I walking through the station and then came out, and the words again, "That's your dad." And I'm looking around, crowded people, rush hour, lots of people coming through London Bridge. "That's your dad." And I'm looking around thinking, my dad, in a panic. He's been missing for months. My dad, "That's your dad." And as I looked, laying underneath like a fruit and veg stall, not open, it was closed, laying underneath a fruit and veg stall on I think I can vaguely remember a sleeping bag or some kind of material, was a man. And my eyes drew into this, closer to this man. "That's your dad." Unrecognisable as my dad, but that was my dad. I went over, and as I looked, "Dad?" That was him. And I took him home. And I was reminded of that this week. I have been speaking to you. Dad's safe, Dad was safe, Dad was home, and all was well.
I remember listening to that story and just getting those shivers, that like, oh. And the scripture immediately came to me, didn't it, Laura? "My sheep hear my voice. My sheep know my voice." And, there's a very clear instance. And how easy it is just to dismiss those things. And I think as you listen to Laura's story, I think as I listened to it, the thing that came out more than anything was God's guidance. And there may be people here and you think that God doesn't speak to you, but he does. Sometimes we're just not listening. We're not listening. And I think maybe if you take something away from today is to listen out for the still, small voice of God. Take note of those thoughts. Take note of, I've often explained to people that when I hear from God, because I have Kathy thoughts, and Laura had Laura thoughts. She thought maybe that was a Laura thought in the beginning, but that thought kept coming, and it's like that thought slices through your own thoughts, and it's like, hang on, I need to pay attention to that. And I don't want to distract from Laura's story, but I think it's all part of it. Yeah. I remember going home from church and having a very similar experience, and I was just washing up, as you do, very ordinary. You know, God often, he just speaks to you in the ordinary moment, like he spoke to Moses when through a burning bush. It was just an ordinary day. It was an ordinary moment, and then it became an extraordinary moment. And I stood there and I was just washing up, and I had a lady in the church just come to my mind that I had to ring her. And I kept thinking, in a minute when I've cleared up, in a minute when I've finished. But the thought was so insistent, as it was for you. That thought was so insistent that I actually dried my hands and I got my phone. And I rang her and I said, "Hi." I said, "It's Kathy. Are you okay?" And there was a silence. There was absolute silence on the end of the phone, and she wasn't speaking. So I kept saying, "Are you okay?" And I realised she wasn't okay. And I said, I'm coming round right now. And I was there within 5 minutes. And that lady was prepared to take her own life that day. We talk about it sometimes. She says to me, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you. I said, it wasn't me, that was God. She said, Kathy, I even mowed the lawn. She said, I'd even mowed the lawn. I'd got everything ready. I'd even mowed the lawn, because that's the sort of person she was, very organised. I'd even mowed the lawn, and she'd done everything. And, you know, part of me just thinks, as you have perhaps, Laura, what if I hadn't listened? What if I hadn't been obedient? You know, what if I had ignored that? You know, would she be here today? So, wow, yeah, God's guidance. Now, I understand that after that very difficult 20 years, you did make a difficult decision in the end, didn't you, Laura?
Yes, I did. So I lived those 20 years being someone who I wasn't happy being. And the relationship between myself and my ex-husband just got worse. And he actually became an alcoholic. I stayed in the relationship and I kept going because I thought that was best for my children. I came from a broken marriage and I thought, hang on, you know, we should be together. But time showed me that the children were better without two parents together that don't actually work together. So, yeah, I made that difficult decision and we separated. And I blossomed. I just became just who I am. I started slowly. I visited my local church and I went along to coffee mornings and I took Harry to creche. Harry was only 1.5 years at the time. So it was a slow process. Also, I was very ashamed of the last 20 years. But it was a slow process and I spent time with Christians. And I encourage you, spend time with fellow Christians because it's a wonderful thing to share. And it just... My faith became stronger again, and I then I started going to church again, and it was 1 year later that I went on a holiday. This holiday, I want to say, I had no plan to meet a man, to remarry, the men weren't on the agenda. But I went on this holiday, on this girls' holiday that I thought would be fun and, you know, girly time. And I met this handsome Spanish man on the beach.
On the beach, girls. I mean, can you get the picture? When she first told me, I was like, oh, it was so Mills and Boon, honestly, so Mills and Boon. Yeah, we were just like, oh, okay, sorry.
So, yeah, we began speaking, but Jose, this Spanish man, didn't actually speak English. So our best friend was Google Translate. And we backwards and forwards with our phone translating conversation, and we just spent the rest of the holiday just sharing everything, and I was just me, and I shared my faith and my past and all that I love and all that I hate, and this man didn't run away. And we decided to meet up again, and we very quickly fell in love. And over the next year, we would commute back and forth, London, Spain, until it got really difficult. The love was so strong that it was really difficult to part, and we needed to make that decision. Was it make or break? Do we leave it now and do we just stay in our own countries, or do we actually do this and get together? So Jose said, I didn't actually plan to meet a 38-year-old woman. I said, excuse me. I didn't actually plan to fall in love with a woman with 2 children and all the rest of it, but I am going to leave my family, and very close, big family. I'm going to leave my family and my beautiful country, very beautiful country, to be with you, Laura. And he moved to London 4 years ago. And we've married and had the best. I've been living my best life. Yes.
So you never know when Jesus is preparing you for something beautiful and unexpected. You never know, do you? And when I first met Laura, and we realised that we had some things in common. Or in fact, Laura and Glenn had some things in common.
Yes.
We happened to be at home. Manuel was there. We were there. We were just Jose was there, and we were chatting. And just tell that
we were having a cuppa.
Story.
And we began talking, and Glenn said, how did it start off, Glenn? Well, yeah, you was asking me about my background and where did you move from, and I said, before I lived in London, I lived in Croydon. And Glenn said, oh yeah, so did I. And I said, no, and Glenn said, yeah, so did I, New Addington. I said, no way. I'm from New Addington, Croydon. And then you said the name of your road where you lived, and I actually just lived round the corner. And then Glenn told me the name of the junior school, Wolsey Junior School, that he went to, and I said, this is crazy, because I went to Wolsey Junior School too. And we just went on from there, and it was quite something.
Wow. No way, Jose, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that all the time. Just came to me. So, you see, when I hear your story, Laura, I just see the hand of God and God's guidance. And you shared, and we're sort of going to wrap up on this. You shared really with how God brought you here, and that's often a story I like to ask people when they come. How was it that you came to Sunrise Church? What made you come? So just for the benefit of those who weren't here at Easter, just tell everybody how you ended up here in Sunrise Church.
So I moved from London to Battle. And when you move into a new place, you need bits and pieces. So I signed up to this Facebook page, to this Free Cycle Facebook page for Battle and Hastings. And advertised on there was the ladder that I needed. The 4.5 aluminium extendable ladder, and that was for me. So I contacted the kind person that had advertised this free ladder, and he said, I'll be in the gardens mowing the lawn. You won't miss me. It's the first building as you turn down the road. Okay. Turned down this road here, and there was Glenn mowing the lawn. I looked around, it's a church, okay. I'd been going to Battle Baptist Church for 3 months before I came here, not feeling quite at home, shall I say, but been going because I wanted to, it was just a great thing. And Glenn noticed my cross as we sort of exchanged ladder and conversation. And he said, do you have a faith? And I mentioned about going to Battle Baptists. And he said, oh, just come along, try it out. If it's not for you, then, you're very welcome to come. And I did, and I've been here since. So a ladder, advertised on Facebook.
God can use a donkey to speak, and he can use a ladder to bring you to where you need to be. Now, how on earth did you get that ladder in that tiny little car?
Yeah, she's very good. It's only a small Nissan Micra, but she has extendable sides, so yeah, it worked.
So that was amazing. Now,
Yes.
we're going to sort of finish off with just there's more to this morning than just hearing Laura's story, because after a year and after her serving faithfully out in the church, Laura is about to take on the role and the position of co-leading with Christine Sunrise Kids.
Thank you.
It's so good. And when she stood up here a little while ago with Christine and they both had a little chat, she had no idea that we were going to ask her that. And she stood up there and she spoke about her passion for kids. She's a TA, she works in a school, she can bring all those skills to the table. And I remember watching the video back, and I was like, she has just talked herself into a job. I mean, and that's what happens. Often when you end up serving and you end up given a title, and titles really mean nothing, you're usually doing the job before you get the title, and that's what she's been doing. And so, Laura, just as we finish, I'd like to pray for you, and just perhaps Glenn, would you like to pray? Manuel, would you like to pray for Laura? Larry, shall we just, she's taking on a role with Christine, and there's a lot of time and there's a lot of commitment there, and perhaps we can just pray over you. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty and sharing. When we ask people to share, we say, share what you feel comfortable with, and she's felt very comfortable sharing.